Welcome back, college football fans, to College Football Coast to Coast. It is week 5 of the college football season. We're going to recap some games that we had picked for week 4 and give you a little rundown of what happened last week. And we'll jump right into week 5 and all anticipated conference matchups coming up this week. But we'll get started with last weekend's matchups, and we'll start in the ACC with number 5 Clemson going on the road to face the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. A top 25 matchup, Tyler, here, and crazy finish to this one. And I don't think anybody expected this game to go past regulation.
Yeah, this was a much anticipated matchup here in the ACC. This was pretty much whoever wins this one is pretty much in the driver's seat in their division. Wake Forest last year won the division. They didn't beat Clemson, but Clemson was a two-loss team, and Wake Forest had a better record in the conference. So this was a huge win for Clemson. I think that a lot of people aren't really giving this Clemson team credit, especially their quarterback DJ Uiagalelei. I think that he had a phenomenal game. This was a battle between the two quarterbacks, both Sam Hartman and DJ Uiagalelei. But I mean, the defenses were just overmatched in this one. I just think that the offenses really had their way. And as you see in the scoreboard, if you're looking on ESPN or whatever app you're looking on, this took the whole regulation, but two more overtimes. So Clemson was able to strike and score a touchdown. And the rules are you have to go for two. They did not go for two. So that really set up, Wake Forest, to score a touchdown and then go for two. But they did not get a touchdown as Clemson's defense was able to hold charge. But you just got to feel for Wake Forest. I mean, they've been so close of beating Clemson in the regular season these past couple of years, and they just can't get it done. I don't know if they will, especially since this is Sam Hartman's last year. I do think that Wake Forest can still go to a bowl game, but it's definitely difficult seeing Wake Forest winning. I think that they're in the Atlantic Division.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's going to be hard for Wake Forest to go back to Charlotte because I'm not really seeing any other loss for Clemson, maybe outside of NC State.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this was a great game of two big offenses. And yeah, I think going forward, Wake Forest after this year could have a downfall in their offense a little bit. Still have some key pieces there, but losing your quarterback is big, especially for a team like Wake Forest. But a good win for Clemson to hang on and hold on to a spot there in the top 5 for another week. And moving on to our next game on the list, we've got K State and Oklahoma. A crazy game, great game, especially for Kansas State. We have the transfer from Nebraska. I think it's Aiden Martinez.
It's Adrian Martinez, yeah.
Adrian Martinez, and kind of led the way for K State. This game was a lot, I think, more spread out than what the score shows you. Kind of garbage time touchdown for Oklahoma with not much time left. And a big win for K State, especially here at this point in the season in a Big 12 race that really it's anybody's ball game right now in the Big 12. So this kind of, I think, stakes the claim that Oklahoma is of no more of huge importance to anybody in the Big 12 after a loss like this. K State has dominated the last 4 matchups, though. They've won 3 of the last 4. And man, I should have known and taken K State to win this one because they came out firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, this was a much needed victory for Kansas State. I think that a lot of people are really counting them out, especially after last weekend. We were talking about the same Kansas State team losing to Tulane at home. But you just know that this one was going to be a battle. Like you mentioned, Kansas State either has covered in the last 4 years or have won in the last 4 years. So they did just that again. And like you said, Adrian Martinez had a big game, both on the ground and through the air. I think that 4 of his touchdowns were with his legs. So he had over 100 yards rushing. And then Deuce Vaughn was also a big part of that. I put this as a key. If Oklahoma doesn't stop Deuce Vaughn, then it's going to be a long game for them. And that's what it was. But Oklahoma's offense, was able to score with Dylan Gabriel. He had 4 touchdowns. But this defense, the same, question marks that Oklahoma fans had whenever Lincoln Riley was there and Jim Knowles, not Jim Knowles, I don't know, remember. It was Grinch, Alex Grinch, the defensive coordinator. Now he's with USC. I get mixed up with the Big 12 defensive coordinators. But yeah, that was a big question mark. Last year's Oklahoma team, they have the offense, but they don't have the defense this year either. So got to give credit to Kansas State. And for the Big 12 in, particular, Oklahoma was really like the setting stone of, the Big 12 getting a playoff team. And now I think the only really teams that can really get it is your undefeated teams, Oklahoma State, but they have a big matchup this weekend against Baylor. You have Kansas, who's 4-0. So, I mean, if we get a Kansas team 12-0, then, man, hell's going to freeze over or something. But, yeah, it seems like the Big 12 playoff hopes really got dashed with K-State beating Oklahoma.
Yeah, crazy conference there to look out for this year and for the following years to come, with Oklahoma leaving to the SEC along with their counterpart Texas. So moving on to the Big Ten and a big matchup here. Most people thought this was kind of going to be a one-sided battle, and Michigan was going to take care of business, but Maryland proved to come in and put up a fight in Ann Arbor, and I had a feeling this would happen. Following Big Ten football for a long time, and Maryland has offense, but the one thing that they lacked is a strong defensive stand, and had some trouble with that on a 4th down and 1. You can't get a stop, and Michigan ends up going for it and gets a big touchdown to seal the victory. But at the end of the day, that's the difference right there. So I mean, it was a big emphasis on the running game for Michigan, and I think it will be going forward. I don't know how much trust they have in JJ McCarthy to let it rip in a game, in a big game going forward. They're going to have some big games coming up. So actually, this upcoming weekend that we'll be talking about, but this here for Maryland, I think, shows that they can stick around in the East, and they're still a team that can win 500, play 500 ball at the end of the season, and might get an upset win every once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I had faith in this Maryland team, especially with the quarterback Talia Tagovailoa. I mean, if you have him on your side, then you're going to pretty much stay in every ball game. That's exactly what Maryland did. And the main question mark that we have for Michigan, I know that we talked about this last week too, but this was really Michigan's first test. I mean, their first 3 games was Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn. I think that out of all those teams, they have one win combined. So I mean, you're really gonna learn about this team. They had JJ McCarthy and Cade McNamara roll out in week 1 and 2, and then JJ McCarthy gets the start. But I think that the MVP for Michigan is Blake Corum, the running back. I think that he right now, if CJ Stroud didn't exist, then Blake Corum would win the Big Ten Player of the Year. But the way that the running game has gone for the past 4 weeks for this Michigan team is definitely a good sign. Obviously, Maryland's defense is one of the greatest in the Big Ten. They're one of, in the middle of the pack there. But they'll be tested this week against Iowa team that's very scrappy. I know that their offense is shaky, but this was the first. This was a 17-point favorite. I know I did not want to touch this with a 10-foot pole as we were doing our weekly parlay. Good thing we didn't. Not like it mattered. We still lost our parlay. We'll get to that later in the show. But yeah, I think I was more impressed with Maryland in this game than I was with Michigan. I think that Maryland team, I would not be surprised if they pull off a couple of upsets, and in the end, we see them as like an 8-win team.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think they're a dark horse team, not so much to win the Big Ten, but a team that compete with people every week. Because I don't think they shy away from that number next to Michigan's name at all, being at number 4, and just shows how much emphasis there can be on a number right there at Michigan being 4. There's a lot of pressure, and they were able to take care of business, but they got a big test upcoming this weekend that we'll get to. But moving on from that game, we'll get into the Pac-12, and number 15 Oregon gets a big win on the road at Wazoo and holds off the Cougars 44-41. Crazy end of this game, Tyler. The way it happened, and it's a shame for Washington State. They couldn't hold on for another big win here after beating Michigan State, I believe last week. So it's going to be a tough bounce back here after giving up 44 points to an Oregon team that absolutely laid the hammer down last week and got a big win at home against BYU. and now going on the road and still putting up another 44 points up here. Uh, that's got to be a head scratcher for Washington State's defense. Offensively, they scored 41 points. Can't ask anything more from that. But uh, Oregon moves on and I guess is going up a little bit further in the ranks, hanging on. And Washington State's going to have to go back to the drawing board.
I tell you what, we had a lot of high scoring shootouts already. I mean, three of the six games that we're looking at in week four, at least two of the teams got into the 40s. And I mean, Oregon, we talked about them in week one, the drubbing of Georgia. I'm not really going to hold them accountable for that. But I mean, go back to, week two now on the week four. I mean, Bo Nix has thrown at least 5 touchdowns in the game. So I think that Bo Nix and this offense, has found their rhythm. I think their defense is still young. I think that there's going to be some growing pains. I mean, you lost one of the best defensive ends in the country of Kayvon Thibodeau going to the Giants. So I think that there's going to be some growing pains with his defense. I think they'll get better as the game goes on. I mean, Washington State, is a team that was undefeated going into this matchup. They were a team that went on to Madison and beat Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin's been a team that's been up and down this season. But to go on the road in a hostile environment, that's a big win. But yeah, like you mentioned, this was one of the crazier endings. We'll talk about even a crazier game next on our recap. But Washington State and Oregon are really we're going score for score, punch for punch, and then Oregon's defense comes out with a pick six to pretty much seal the game. It got it up to like a 10-point lead. So Washington State didn't have enough time, but man, I mean, when you're talking about like USC and Utah at the top of the Pac-12, but I don't think that Oregon is done yet, especially with the way that the offense has been playing.
Yeah, for sure. I think Bo Nix found his calling there in Oregon for now. After his long stint with Auburn, it seems like he has moved on to bigger and better things and a successful team that he's taken hold of there. And moving on to that crazy game in the SEC, number 10 Arkansas went to Jerry's World to face off in a neutral site matchup against Texas A&M. A&M holds on 23-21 and a heartbreaking loss for Auburn as their kicker doinked one off of the top of the right upright, and it did not go through, and ended up falling back into the end zone. And that was pretty much all she wrote there. But for Texas A&M, capitalizing on a big mistake by KJ Jefferson, trying to reach over into the end zone in one of the craziest sequences I've seen in college football, and ended up getting the ball, ripping it out of his hand, getting the ball, and ultimately getting held up. The defender ultimately getting held up for the most part, and ended up handing the ball backwards to one of his other teammates who ran all the way down the field, basically for a 98-yard touchdown return. And that was kind of the sealing touchdown there that sealed the deal in the first half. And ultimately, Arkansas never came back from that. Tyler, for you, what's the one thing that Arkansas has to do? I mean, they've got a tough matchup coming up this week, and this was a lot for them to handle last week. And I know that you and I thought that Arkansas could take care of business here, and they seem to struggle against an A&M team that I don't think anybody knows who they are.
Yeah, I mean Arkansas. We look at their schedule right now. They lost to Texas A&M, and the losses can keep piling up because their next two games, obviously the Alabama game, then you have Mississippi State on the road. So those are two games, where you have high-powered offenses. I think that Arkansas's defense really struggled against the run here because Devin Achane was able to do what he wanted. He had 130 rushing yards. And obviously the big hitter for Texas A&M is losing Anaya Smith. He's going to be out for the season. So now if you're on Texas A&M side, what are you going to do in the passing game? I know, Anaya Smith was pretty much your guy. He was a fast guy, ran a 4.3, same with Achane out of the backfield. So, Achane is pretty much going to have to be the do-it-all he's going to have to be, catching out the backfield and then running it out of the backfield as well. So, Texas A&M, you won the game, but at what cost? You lost one of your best playmakers, and he was also your punt returner as well. So now they're going to shuffle, who's going to repunt turns. It'll probably be A-Chain as well, but I mean that's a lot of ask for a young kid, to do everything for your team. But Arkansas, yeah, definitely some concerns in their defensive line, especially in the running game. How are they going to fare against now Jahmyr Gibbs and that Alabama rushing attack. And I honestly think, Arkansas's secondary was also filled with some holes as well. A&M was able to bust a lot of plays as well. But like you mentioned, it was a crazy sequence both in that scoop and score to really change the momentum of the ball game, and then the doink because okay, so what happened was we lost our parlay in Eastern Michigan, so we were like, all right, let's try and do another one. So Jacob texted me, all right, we'll do like 6 of them. We South Alabama check. Pretty much we were like 3-0 already, and then this game happens: Arkansas and Texas A&M. Whenever Arkansas was driving down the field, like, all right, well, we're gonna go 4-0, and then like whenever the doink happened, we were just like surrender cobras. It was like this, so not a good day for betting, but hopefully we can eventually win a parlay.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway in this game is I think that A&M has figured it out at quarterback.
Yep.
Max Johnson
I mean,
will
it gives
be
them
the guy.
life. I mean,
Yeah,
we saw this A&M team 2 weeks ago, Payne's King lose to App State, and now they get a win against Miami. I know now the Miami win doesn't look that great since they just got walloped by Middle Tennessee, but to get a top 10 win, against Arkansas, now Texas A&M goes on the road to Mississippi State, and then they have Bama. So these next 2 weeks for this team are going to be huge because I mean, the one loss, didn't come in the SEC, so they still have everything to play for. Atlanta is still on the table, so this A&M team is definitely not out of a good season.
for sure. Yeah, they both of these teams have the same schedule, just flip flop for the next 2 weeks, and definitely could see some fireworks happen in the next 2 weeks in the SEC with these teams involved. But moving on from that to our one group of five that we're going to recap, Southern Miss holds on in Tulane, a game that Southern Miss trailed for most of this game and ended up coming back and holding on to a final of 27-24, a field goal win uh, for Southern Miss. Big win for that program and that coaching staff there. Tulane is nothing to sneeze at, like we mentioned. They did beat K State earlier in the season a few weeks ago, and Southern Miss a good bounce back win for them as one of the new members of the Sun Belt. Uh, Tyler, your takeaway for Southern Miss and how they can be a dark horse in the Sun Belt Conference, and is Tulane season effectively over?
For Southern Miss side, I mean, the Sun Belt is stacked. I mean, you have teams at the top. You have, well, I don't know about App State now. They're 2-2. They just lost to James Madison. I think I can't really say James Madison since they're ineligible to be in the Sun Belt title. So pretty much, you have Coastal Carolina at the top, and then South Alabama is a team that no one has been talking about in the Sun Belt. I know that a lot of people have been putting their money where their mouth is on the Jacks because they've covered in every game. But you look at South Alabama's offense, and they are really good. I mean, they put up 30 points in every game. Their defense has they forced, like, I watched the game. That was one of our parlays. They had like 4 turnovers in the span of like 3 minutes. So I mean, they can turn the ball over as well. For Southern Miss's side, you definitely have some talent in the run game. You have Frank Gore Jr. He had a good game against Tulane. Like you said, Southern Miss in the past couple of years, they fired like 2 coaches in the span of like 5 years. So this has been a program that has a lot of history, but in the past couple of years, it's just been down. They haven't been to a bowl game in a couple of years. And for Tulane side, I'm not going to really say that their season is over yet. Maybe this was just too much emotion coming off of that big win on the road in Manhattan, Kansas against Kansas State. I think that the American Conference is pretty much wide open. I think that Cincinnati and Houston are going to be at the top, and you'll have probably Tulane and UCF on the second tier. So by no means their season is over. But is this a bad loss? Yeah, especially since, you created all that momentum, you're undefeated, and then you just fall flat at home against Southern Miss, a team that you should have beaten.
Yeah, and shifting gears back to you mentioned South Alabama. South Alabama's one loss comes on the road against
Yeah,
a
it was
Power
a field
Five.
goal at
Yeah,
the end.
against a Power Five opponent in UCLA. Had South Alabama held on and wins that game, if they win
They
that
might be in
game,
the top 25
they might
streak
be in
right
the
now.
top 25 with a win like that. So definitely some concern there in some, for especially for Southern Miss. I mean, you can get left behind pretty quickly by some teams that can pass you up. And a lot of these teams within this conference are very close knit, very close together. And, that really could diminish your recruiting. I mean, from one team to the other. So, because a lot of these schools are only a couple hours apart, and can really shift the focus of your team and your overall program going forward for the next 4 years.
Yeah, one more thing for the Sun Belt. I think the good thing is if you're Southern Miss, you're on the West Division. The East Division is just stacked with Coastal, James Madison, Old Dominion, App State. I mean, you have like I'm seeing at the top. South Alabama and Southern Miss are still yet to play. In Sun Belt Conference play, you have Louisiana Monroe at the top, which is definitely surprising. They got a big win against Louisiana. I think that Louisiana this year, especially with a new head coach, they're probably not going to win the Sun Belt. You have Troy up there, who's 1-1. They got a win against Georgia Southern, and then a win against, and then lost to App State. So I mean, if you're South Alabama and Southern Miss, I mean, you look at your Southern Miss, you're 2-2. South Alabama, you're 3-1. I mean, I think the West is going to be an easier division this year than the East because the East is stacked.
Yeah, for sure. And moving out of that recap and moving on to our reactions for the top 25 and our biggest fallers and our biggest movers up the rankings. It is brought to you by one of our newest sponsors, and that is Fanatics. If you guys go ahead and use our link that is linked in our show, you guys can purchase anything on Fanatics on there. Use the discount code that is available on their website there. And of course, we get some sort of commission from that purchase, and it would help out this show and the Sports Scramble show and Tyler and Wade's SEC talk immensely, and we could grow a lot faster and get throughout the country a lot faster because we are going coast to coast with college football. So we want to span all that area, and you guys can help grow our show and the podcast to bigger and higher levels. But moving on from that to our reactions for the AP Top 25. Tyler, your biggest movers. I'll give you two biggest movers in the top 25, and then your one faller.
All right, so my two big movers is actually going to be two of them entering the poll. It's going to be the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I mean, I think that a lot of hype right now. Everyone's talking about Ohio State. Everyone's talking about Michigan, but poor old Minnesota. They're rowing the boat on their way to 4-0 right now. They do have a big game at home against Purdue this week. Purdue's been a team that's only have one win on the season. That's against Indiana State. That's been a team that struggled, especially in big games against Syracuse and then Penn State. But, man, I feel like every Minnesota game has just been a blowout. I mean, every team that's been on their schedule, they've just been wiping the doors out of them. I mean, I think their biggest one was this past weekend against Michigan State, where I think they shut them out. It was like 34-0. I was looking at their stats. Not Michigan. I've been talking about Michigan too much on the show. Minnesota has the number 2 rush defense, and then they're also in offense. They're ranked number 3, just behind Tennessee and Ohio State. So this is a very well-balanced machine. I definitely think, you have talent coming through this. You had Rashad Bateman, who's now in the Baltimore Ravens. So now you have Tanner Morgan, who's been there for like 6 years. So you have that experience, on the offense and the defense side of the ball. So, I mean, Minnesota, looking at their schedule, they have Penn State on the road. I definitely think that's going to be a challenge. And then obviously they have Iowa and Wisconsin coming up later in the year. But I think that, this is PJ Fleck's, best team that since he's been there since probably that 2019 season, I believe, whenever they're ranked like in the top 10 when they beat Penn State. You have to correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that, this could be the year that Minnesota finally cracks that division title because Iowa looks down, Wisconsin looks down, pretty much that whole division looks down. I think that Minnesota's the best team by far. And then my next big mover is the Florida State Seminoles. This has been a team that I've been lobbying for to get into the top 25. I think that they are deserving. They were on a bye week this past week, and they have a big test coming up in the ACC against Wake Forest. So, I think with Jordan Travis leading the way, I think that their offense is legit. Their defensive line is a real deal. We saw that in the home opener, not in the home opener, the season opener against LSU. So those are my two big movers. So before I get my faller, who are your two big movers?
First on my big movers list is a fellow Mississippi team, and that is Ole Miss. I know they didn't move very far up
Only
there.
2 spots.
They're creeping up. really slowly, and they're working their way back into their New Year's Six spot from last year. A great football team all around, offensively, defensively, they look really solid, and they're a team in the SEC that I think could surprise a lot of people this year. And I had mentioned that early on in our show for our preview for the season. And I mentioned that Southern, or sorry, not Southern, Ole Miss is a team to look out for because they can score the football fast, and they have great talent on both sides of the ball, and look forward to them moving even further up, maybe even into the top 10 as some of these teams face off rank matchups here in the coming weeks. My other big mover would be a team that is now currently in the top 25. They are sitting at 25, and that is K State. K State's at 3-1 after their win against Oklahoma, and they've entered the top 25 now. Exciting for them, exciting for that program. It's been a while since they've been there, and good for their program. And hopefully they move up the rankings a little bit in that Oklahoma game, kind of gives them a boost into the Big 12. They can join Baylor and Oklahoma State up there.
All right, so now we're going to go on to our biggest faller, and I'm going to go with this: the Texas
Oof.
Longhorns. This has been a team, all they're receiving all the hype even after the loss of Alabama. I think that a lot of people think that they should have won that game. I think that, with Quinn Ewers being out, that was definitely a big factor in that game. I mean, there's a lot of hype. A lot of people are, were gaining respect and saying, Texas is back. They only lost to the number one team in Alabama, who's been pretty much a powerhouse in the past decade in college football. But, then you fall flat and, you win against UTSA. I know they've been with a backup quarterback, and then they lose to in Lubbock in Texas Tech. I put them on upset alert for a reason. Texas, this was their first loss in Lubbock since 2008, and that was one of the craziest games in 2008. If you remember, Michael Crabtree had the game-winning touchdown. Can't remember the dude's quarterback, but that man had like the game of his life. He was number 6. I don't remember his name. I'll have to go look it up at the show, but he balled out against Colt McCoy. I mean, that was just like the game of the year in 2008. But I think that Texas has fallen flat, especially, this was a year with a lot of high expectations with a really good recruiting class that Sarkisian brought in, especially of Bijan Robinson. I mean, the way that the defense played in week 2, you would thought that they would continue that. Well, that was not the case, as Texas Tech was able to really handle that game. So Texas is not back, folks, as they are my biggest faller of the week.
Yeah, and for me, I have another big faller as well,
Is it
and
this?
that is the U.
Oh, no.
Yes. So Miami has a huge loss to Middle Tennessee State, uh, 45-31,
Yikes.
a 2 touchdown loss at home against a team that was 2-1 coming into the game. And I don't know if Miami overlooked them or what it was, but I mean, it was kind of it was all over the place there. But a great game for Chase Cunningham at quarterback for Middle Tennessee State. Over 400 yards passing, 3 touchdowns in this game. A great game there, carrying the ball. They go with 3 guys in the backfield at Middle Tennessee State, and they all contributed pretty well. Their main back carrying it 19 times for 74 yards. So a big air attack there for that team right there. And 2 guys with over 100 yards receiving and ultimately taking down Miami and the Hurricanes there. So it looks to be like, the Miami had, well, they've got this quarterback now, and he's going to be the prodigy of the ACC. And all of a sudden, here we go
Yeah,
again.
Rick benched him that game, too.
Yeah. And it seems to be like, we go back and we look at the whole, well, Manny Diaz wasn't doing anything. He wasn't the right guy for the job. And he ultimately ended up leaving, and now he's with Penn State now at defensive coordinator. But really, the load of it was thrown on the coaching staff. And at some point, it can't be thrown on the coaching staff anymore, and players just got to go out and play. I don't think it's a coaching mistake in a game like this. I just don't think the guys played to their full potential. I mean, you're down 24-10 at half to a team that is basically considered a no contest. You're playing at home, and you can't figure it out in the second half, and he ended up matching them shot for shot, and they still win by 14. So this is a Miami offense that we saw put up tons of points early on in the season. We're like, wow, this might be something. They might be an all-out air raid offense uh, for the year, and we got to pay attention to how many points they're putting up. They're losing a cupcake game to Middle Tennessee State, and props to Middle Tennessee State though, a big win for them. They're 3-1 now, and hopefully, they got UTSA on the agenda this week, and that'll be a big matchup there. And maybe they can pull out a win at home against UTSA.
I tell you what, I have no idea who's going to win this Coastal Division. It's like the Big Ten West. I mean, you have Miami collapsing, you have North Carolina looking not so great against Notre Dame this week. Their high-powered offense is great, but their defense is like one of the worst. And they gave up 40 points to a Notre Dame team that was barely scoring over 20 points. So I don't know who's going to win the Coastal Division. It might even be Duke at this rate.
It might be. It might be, and we might be looking at a Duke ACC champion and a Kansas Big 12 champion. It's going to be looking like a March Madness segment of college football edition come to the end of the season here, as those are two big basketball schools, and they look like they're moving along here in football and figuring something out. But moving on from our AP Top 25 into our games of the week, opening up with, of course, the ACC as always, because it begins with an A, and it comes at the beginning of the alphabet.
It's
So we're going to
not
start
because
with
they're the best in the best Power Five conference. That's why they're not first.
And the game that we have on our agenda, of course, are two top 25 games. And one is close to not being a top 25 game, barely.
Whoever loses is out, pretty much.
Yes. And Wake Forest is going on the road to Tallahassee to play against Florida State, who's at 23. So it's a 22-23 matchup here. Good game, I think. It'll be quarterback position is something to watch here. And at home, if Travis is healthy, then I think Florida State wins this game at home. As for Wake Forest, I think Wake Forest has to rely on the defense in this game. Offensively, they can put points up. 45 points a game is enough to win a game, but you have to have a strong defense, especially against Florida State. Their quarterback likes to get out of the pocket, run a little bit, and quite frankly, I think he's probably second on my list as far as college quarterbacks go that I've seen scramble out of the pocket and be able to deliver a cannon on the move is incredible with the amount of power he can throw the ball. I mean, I watched him throw against like across his body to a receiver in absolutely laser of a throw right on the money, and he's very accurate at quarterback, and it seems like if Florida State is still undefeated after a week like this, at the quarterback position, we have to be talking about Jordan Travis and potentially their backup, who's also a great quarterback there as well.
Yeah, I definitely think that Jordan Travis with the bye week is going to be able to play and be healthy in this one. But like you said, I mean, last time we saw this team, the backup did pretty dang good against Louisville in their win on the road. But I'm not really concerned with both of these offenses. They've shown that they can score. I think the advantage for defense is easy for me, and Florida State's defense is way better than Wake Forest. Forest can't stop anyone. So I think that Florida State will be able to do what they want in this one. It's at home. The tomahawk chop is going to be chopping, and I think that Florida State is going to continue their undefeated stretch as Wake Forest will start their downward spiral. But this is really two back-to-back tough games for Wake Forest. You coming off that emotional loss, how are you going to bounce back? You have to go on the road to a tough environment. I think that Florida State fans are definitely bought into this year what Mike Norvell has been doing. So I think that Florida State gets it done in a close battle, like a 38-35 type of game. But I'm gonna go with the Noles in this one.
I literally thought about the same score as you.
I mean,
So yeah,
it's going to be a lot of points. I just think that
I'll
the
roll
offenses are just too
38-35 as
good.
well. I'm pretty confident in that score. So yeah, I think it's a field goal game at the end of this game. But Florida State, I think, is uh, a way better all around team than Wake Forest right now. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Oh,
Uh,
you wouldn't
but
have said that last year.
I wouldn't have said it last year as I had Wake Forest in the ACC championship. But I think Florida State now is the better team, and after another win here, we could see them inside the top 20 for Week 6. And moving on to our second game in the ACC, it's a top 10 matchup. NC State, yes, is still hanging on at number 10, and they're going on the road to face off against Clemson, who's still the number 5 team in the country. They held on in overtime against Wake Forest and ended up holding on to their spot at number 5. First of all, Tyler, do you think they should have held on to their spot at number 5, or USC sitting at 6 right now? Should USC have jumped them to number 5?
No, because USC only won by 3 against an unranked Oregon State team. I mean, at least Wake Forest was a top. I think they were like number 15 or 16 at the time, so
Mhm.
they were up there. So that was it was on the road. I know that they struggled, but they put up 51 points. I mean USC only put up 17 points against Oregon State. But in this matchup, like you said, I mean I'm not really looking at NC State as a number 10 team. They haven't shown in their number 10 team. Going all the way back to their opener against East Carolina, they probably should have lost that if East Carolina's could kick a field goal through the upright. So but that's nothing against him. But I just think that this NC State team is yet, to have their best game of the season. They played Texas Tech good. Their defense was able to hold strong. I think their defense will also be challenged again. Looks like Clemson's offense is looking to find their rhythm. But I think that, NC State, like Wake Forest, has the offense and has the quarterback to really contest with Clemson, especially with Devin Leary leading the charge. But since it's in Clemson, I think I'm going to go with the Tigers in this one. This has been a back and forth battle between these two teams in the past couple of years, but got to go with Clemson just because it's at home, and I just think that this team is really rolling.
Yeah, this is an intriguing game for me. Uh, the Wolfpack, yes, like you mentioned, they haven't played like a top 10 team. Kind of got that Michigan effect where they haven't really played anybody to show their full potential and to see how they can match up. And this is going to be a huge test. We all remember what happened last year at NC State. They got a big upset win against Clemson, and Clemson ultimately ended up falling down the rankings quite a ways and were a non-factor last year. And NC State, after that, kind of held on a little bit, and then they started to diminish as the season went on, and ultimately didn't make it, having trouble getting past Wake Forest and Pitt. But I think this game ultimately is a stepping stone for NC State more than Clemson. I'm gonna go with the upset pick here. I'm gonna take NC State to beat Clemson. Clemson was too close to call last week against a Wake Forest team that didn't look very good at all around. They gave up 45 points to Wake Forest and ended up having to go to overtime to figure it out. I don't think NC State's going to make the same mistakes on defense that Wake Forest did, and I think they're all around better, more experience all around. As Wake Forest have more experience at quarterback, I think they just have. I think NC State has a little bit more experience all around, especially on defense, and that secondary is seasoned veterans. I believe only lost one guy on the defensive starting 11 guys. So I think this is going to be a big game for them. I think they've circled this on the calendar, and I think they're going to win this game. I don't think it's going to be a high scoring game. I'm going to go 24-21 in this one. It's going to be a grinded out battle in this one to see who takes it home, and I think NC State can get one on the road. But moving on from the ACC into the Big 12, another top 10, not top 10, sorry, top 25 matchup, almost top 15. Uh, Oklahoma State going on the road to face off against the Baylor Bears in Waco. Big game here. Arguably the two best teams in the Big 12 outside of Kansas, who's still not in the top 25, but we'll get to them in a minute. But Oklahoma State going on the road to Baylor. This is a team that for Oklahoma State, no defense, a lot of offense versus Baylor, who's pretty balanced. Tyler, who do you think takes it home in this one?
This is tough for me because I am very high on this Oklahoma State team, but this is also in Waco. This is a tough road trip for Oklahoma State. Like you mentioned, Spencer Sanders, the quarterback there. I mean, they can score on anybody. I don't know. I don't even care if it's Baylor's defense, but their defense is just I don't know. It's not bad, but I mean they gave up like 44 points to Central Michigan, and that was the same team that just went on the road to Penn State. And then Oklahoma State, their defense has improved. I mean, in the Arizona State game, they improved there, but you can't really say anything about Arizona State now since they don't really have a head coach. But this is definitely a de facto Big 12 championship game for me. I think whoever wins this one is pretty much a lock to be in the Big 12 championship. I mean, Baylor is a one loss, but their loss came out of the conference. A tough road trip for BYU, but like you mentioned, Baylor is a very balanced team. The quarterback play this past weekend was spectacular on the road at Ames, Iowa. Baylor was able to put up 31 points against a scrappy Iowa State team. So, with that being at home, if this was in Stillwater, I'd probably go with the Cowboys. But since it's in Waco, I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears in a close one. I will say, I think that the winner will get into the 30s. I think that these offenses are too talented for that. So I'll go 31-28 Baylor.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to agree with you on the upset pick here. I think I'm going to take Baylor at home as well. I think
I really see it as upset, though. I mean, both of these teams are very even.
yeah, they're pretty even on like the rankings show. I mean, that one loss to BYU kind of dropped Baylor a little bit, uh, but pretty evenly matched as far as offensive threat goes. Defense is the biggest thing for me in this one. If Baylor can take care of turnovers and capitalize on them, if they get a fumble recovery in Oklahoma State's in a pick six, I mean, if Sanders throws a couple interceptions, this game could be over fast because Baylor is not one to miss out on mistakes from the other team. So I've got Baylor winning this one at home as well. I think I'm going to go 35-28. I'll give it a touchdown win. But I think Baylor, they're my pick. They were my pick to go to the Big 12 championship. So I have to roll with them. I just think that they're the more balanced team. And I like balance versus all out offensive threat, I think. And I guess that's just me coming from a background of defense,
Yep.
watching so much of the Big Ten. Defense
You're
gets me
most used
fired
to
up.
like 12,000 punts in a game and ending like 5-3.
Absolutely. And moving on to our second game, Iowa State going on the road to face off against Kansas. Man, so a battle of a team, a one loss Iowa State team, and an undefeated Kansas. Uh, Kind of interesting to think that Kansas is undefeated right now at
It's
4 and 0. It's
This isn't
mind
basketball,
blowing.
right?
Yeah, so I gotta sometimes I gotta think if this is football or basketball we're talking about. But no, their team they look completely different. I mean, it's not the Kansas of old, and this is very new and exciting for that program at KU. Uh, as for Iowa State, if they want to win this game at Kansas, Kansas seems to be building momentum every week. I think if Iowa State wants to win this game in Kansas, what's it going to be, Tyler?
I have no idea. I mean, honestly, this is one of the more hotter teams in college football. A lot of people need to put more respect on their quarterback, Jalen Daniels. I mean, I want to see that man in the Heisman Trophy ceremony. I don't care. I'm tired of seeing, a Georgia quarterback and then Alabama quarterback every now and then. Get a Kansas quarterback out there. Like, come on, like get some of these, smaller programs that haven't had like much success. I mean, if Kansas, runs the table, I think he definitely deserves it. I think if they go like 10-2 or better, which is just crazy to think about Kansas going that good. I don't think anyone had this Kansas team even winning 4 games this season the way that their schedule lined up. But I think that Iowa State will be able to find the end zone in this game. I mean, Kansas's defense has been up and down. Duke was able to find success in their game. against the Jayhawks. But the problem is, can you stop this Kansas offense? I mean, Jalen Daniels, I mean, has been just tearing it up the field. I mean, both with his legs and through the air. So I'm not going to pick against Kansas. I do think that this is going to be a close game. Iowa State is very scrappy. This is going to be a raucous environment. Probably going to be another sold out environment. So I'm going to go Rock Chalk Jayhawk here. I'm going to give them the 38-31 victory against the Colognes.
I just can't get over the fact that we're saying we got to watch out for the lethal offense of Kansas. They're going. This team could barely move the ball last year.
That's the beauty of 2022, folks. You
It's
just
crazy.
all the hype is around Kansas.
Everybody got a clean slate. Could you imagine seeing a Baylor and Kansas Big 12
Can you imagine
championship?
seeing Kansas, being the playoff against like the number 1 seed Alabama? It's just, I
But
saw like one. Actually saw something. I saw like I think it was like CBS Sports. They did like their bowl projections, and guess who was in the Sugar Bowl? Alabama versus Kansas. What a joy
that's
that! I might have to go to New Orleans just to see Kansas if that happens.
that's crazy to me. But what's even more wild is that if we talk about Heisman, if their quarterback, if he can somehow make it to the Heisman Trophy presentation and the ceremony and everything, he would be the first since Lamar Jackson basically to be there as a team. I mean, I know it's different considering it still is Power Five, but a team that's
Probably one of like the
really
powerhouse programs.
yeah, it's not a big program. So I think it would be fantastic for him, fantastic for that Kansas program. I think they're going to get a lot more recruiting in the Big 12 now, especially with Oklahoma
I
and
think Lance Leipold is
Texas.
doing a phenomenal job coaching too.
Yes.
I think they I mean they've been through like so many coaches in the past couple of years. I think they got the right guy finally.
Yeah, I just didn't think Les Miles was the answer in Kansas and was kind of
Too
a
stubborn.
rebound.
Too stubborn.
Yeah, and they needed a fresh look and a fresh start, and they got it, and they're 4-0. And I'm going to roll with them as well. I think they can go 5-0 to start the season. I
I
mean, that's
still can't even imagine
wild.
it.
5-0, almost halfway through the season, and they will have no losses. That would be unbelievable. I think they'll win this game. I don't think this is a big offensive shootout. I'm going to go 24-21 in this one. I'll take Kansas at home. I just think they're the better team all around, and that's going to make me laugh saying that. But I think they're the better team. But moving on to the Big Ten, good matchups here this week as well. Michigan, after their close win at home, have to make a trip to Iowa City to play the Iowa Hawkeyes in Kinnick. Uh, Tyler, who comes out on top in this one? Is it the high-powered offense of Michigan that we've seen at the beginning of the season, or is it the ultimate defense that scores more points on offense than their offense?
Yeah, I was feeling really good about Michigan until last week of the hype. I was buying into their hype, and now I don't know. Like, I mean, that was. I mean, I think they definitely got a wake up call in this game. We'll see if they can answer the bell. I know that Iowa's offense isn't the greatest, but still playing at Kinnick. I know that this is, I believe it's the big noon kickoff, so that's
Yes.
unfortunate for Iowa fans having to deal with an 11 o'clock kickoff. There would definitely be a more hostile environment if it was at night. But I still think that their environment will be good enough to keep Iowa close in this game, especially with their defense. I think that Iowa's defense is one of the best in the Big Ten. Penn State also has one of the best as well. Ohio State, we'll see. I think that Jim Knowles is doing a good job up there, the former Oklahoma State defensive coordinator. But going on to Michigan, I think that if they can't really get their running game going, that's going to be a big uh-oh for Michigan fans in this one because Blake Corum is pretty much, putting the team on his back and said, all right, let's go, boys. But so if Blake Corum can't go in this one, J.J. McCarthy, this is pretty much his first road test. I mean, Michigan has played in the Big House for the first 4 weeks, so this is going to be his big road test. I think that he's going to have a couple of mistakes. I think there's going to be some growing pains. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I think that Michigan is going to look so great in this one, but I do have them escaping at the end. I'll give them the 17-10 win over Iowa.
Yeah. So here, I'll throw it at you right now. I've got the Hawkeyes winning
I
at
figured
home.
that.
Michigan just doesn't seem the team they were for the first couple of weeks. Of course, they didn't play anybody really. They played the peanut gallery for the first couple of weeks, and it's time that they play somebody. And Iowa's not a perfect program this year. They're not exactly the team to take your breath away in the Big Ten West this year. We'll get to
Like
them.
that song.
Yeah, yeah. So it is a game here, like you said, it's going to be a messy game. I think Iowa wins this game because it's a messy game. I think they're more seasoned in that department of dealing with messy games, especially with their in-state counterpart in
The whole
Iowa
season
State.
has been messy
That's
pretty much.
always messy. So it's always messy there. And I'm going to have them winning. Ready for this? I'm going to go 14-7 Iowa at home. I think Michigan scores one time with a running back in Corum, but I don't think they can score again. It'll be very tough for them to score in that environment, and it's going to be a grinded out game. But I've got Iowa hanging on at home and upsetting Michigan. Michigan's going to fall a long ways
Yeah, if they
after a
lose this
loss.
one, they'll be in like 17, 18 range.
Yes, and I think they would be a non-factor if they lose another game. They still have to play Penn State and Ohio State
Or yeah, they're
after
going to
this
lose
as
at least
well.
one or two more games if they. I mean, they're not going to go 2-0 against Penn State and Ohio State.
No, it would be very tough with a loss at Iowa. But moving on from this, Purdue, uh, with a rough start to the year this year, is going on the road to play the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Still, gotta be a close name, the Golden Gophers. It's
I
fantastic.
love it.
Uh, and the Gophers are 21 currently in the country. They're undefeated, steamrolling some people this year. Big win against Michigan State last week. I mean, only held Michigan State to what, 7 points?
Yeah, it was something
Uh,
like that. I don't think they shut him out, but it was like 38-7, something like that.
that is rough for a Michigan State team that was playing at home. And Minnesota came in there and shut them down, and they look great. And they're my pick in the Big Ten West right now to come out in the Big Ten West. They're fantastic. And I expect them to blow the doors off of Purdue, especially being at home. This game, I think they'll go, uh, man, I'm going to go 42-14. I'll give it to Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, I'm get your words out. We're rowing the boat this weekend for Minnesota. I got Minnesota in this one. I see this one as a complete overmatch. I mean, Purdue's offense, if Aiden O'Connell, they have the experience, but their defense just looks completely out of sorts. So they lost, George Karlaftis last year, and that was pretty much the face of their defense last year. That's why they were so good. I know it's just one player, but that one player can really affect. Purdue is young. They also lost, some key weapons in the receivers to the NFL as well. So, Purdue, I picked them to win the Big Ten West. I'm going to go ahead and take that back. I'm going to hop on the boat here with PJ Fleck the rest of the way. So I'm going to have Minnesota win this one. I think that they cruise in this matchup. Purdue really isn't the team that I really thought that they were going to be. I'm going to go Minnesota. I guess I pretty much agree. If your score 42-14, I'll up it. I'll go 45-13.
Okay. And moving on from the Big Ten to the Pack Attack, we're heading out west. Number 15, Washington, led by Michael Penix Jr., is headed down to LA to play in the Rose Bowl against UCLA and the Bruins. Big matchup here. Point spread is not very far apart. They're expecting this to be a close matchup. I'm not. I'm expecting Washington to come in. I think the Huskies will take care of business here. I think them being 15, it doesn't put pressure on them, sure, but I think they're ready for the challenge. I think it's about time that they come back and revisit the top 25 and say, "Hey, we're back." And I think this is the season that's going to happen. I think they can stay in that 15 range season long. Uh, but I think they get a big win here on the road at UCLA. UCLA has struggled against group of five teams this year and not really had great success, I think, uh, to open the season. So I've got the Huskies winning big in this one. I'm going to go 34-14. I think they can take care of business.
Yeah, I feel like every year that we do this show, I always have that one team that I pick every week and week out. This year it's Washington. I mean, I picked them a couple of weeks ago to upset Michigan State, and they really played well. And this is a road test. I wouldn't really call this a road test because the Rose Bowl had like 500 fans in the past like couple
Yeah.
of 2 weeks of the season. The attendance hasn't been bad. I mean, obviously, it's 100 degrees out there. I wouldn't be wanting to be out there. I don't care if my team is 12-0 or not. But UCLA is undefeated. But I circle back to that South Alabama game. I think we're going to learn a lot about that game, whether South Alabama is really, really good or UCLA is not so great. So I think that this is going to be the test here in the Pac-12. I think this is going to be a really good game. I don't really see this as a blowout, as you're saying. I think this is going to be more a defensive battle. I think I have more faith in Michael Penix. He has more experience, but Dorian Thompson-Robinson is also a very good quarterback. He's a dual threat quarterback as well. So I'm going to get Washington the road win here. I think it's going to be very close. Both teams will get into the 20s. I'll go 24-20 Washington in this one.
All right. And then moving on to our second game, Oregon State coming off only after a touchdown loss to USC. They're headed to Utah to play the number 12 Utes. Good matchup here, I think. I think it lines up well on Oregon State's schedule, and here's why. They played a good team last week. They battled them tooth and nail to the very end. Excuse me. I think that they'll be ready for this one, especially after last week. I think they're going to come into this game and say, "Look, we only lost by a touchdown. One mistake cost us the loss in that game." I think they're going to look at this and say, Utah is not what they are. We need to come in and dominate this team on the road. I think Oregon State gets the win at Utah. I think it proves that Utah could be a two-loss team early in the season, and it could tell the story, I think, for the Pac-12. It could tell the story of USC as the team to beat, or a team like Washington as well, stepping up. But I think Oregon State is a team that can upset some teams, kind of like a Maryland does in the Big Ten. So I've got Oregon State winning this one. Very, very close game. A lot of offense in this game. I'm going to go 38-35. I think they hang on for a 3-point victory on the road.
Man, giving up on Utah this early? Shoot, you had them in the playoff, and now you have them already 2 losses going into
I do.
October.
Things have changed fast.
Look at here. Look at here. I know that a lot of people are probably going to think that this is a sexy upset pick. Oregon State only lost by 3, but this is not at Beaver Stadium. This is at Utah. Utah never, ever loses at home, especially if it's a night game. It is a night game on the West Coast. They never pick against them. So I'm going to go Utah. I don't think this is going to be close. I think a lot of people are really buying into Oregon State. Utah's the same team that I was looking at last year. I'm still buying into Utah. They did lose in the road opener against Florida. Florida already has 2 losses to Tennessee and Kentucky, both in the SEC. So it looks like Florida is in for an up and down year. I think that Utah still has the pieces of both on defense to really match Oregon State. And I think that Oregon State's defense is going to have, they held, one of the best offenses in Caleb Williams. So I think this is going to be more defensive battle once again. But I got Utah winning this one. I'll say 24-14.
All right. And moving on from the Pac-12 back to the South, we're headed to the SEC for the games of the week here. In a top 15 matchup, Kentucky number 7 right now, moving up really sneaky. And I think they're a great pick currently in the SEC to move up even further and give Alabama a run for their money. Kentucky is going to Oxford to play against Ole Miss, who's ranked at 14. Great game here. I think whoever wins this game has the best shot at beating Alabama. And I think is the best bet for the conference other than them in Georgia. And I'm going to go with Kentucky. I think Kentucky can handle business on the road. Veteran quarterback Will Levis. He's my pick for the Heisman Trophy, actually. And I think he is a great all-around quarterback, of course, coming from Penn State. So there's a tiny bit of bias there, but a big guy and a physical quarterback. And he can command an offense very well, has grown a lot. And I think he is I think he's the best quarterback in the SEC currently. I think he's better than Bryce Young up to this point. all around. And I've got Kentucky coming in and taking care of business. Close game, close game. I'm going to go 28-26, and I'm going to give it to Kentucky. Wacky score, but I'll take it.
Someone gets a safety or something. But yeah, I think that these are two very even teams, two very balanced teams. I think their defenses are better than people assume. I mean, these are two of the more legit SEC defense that you see in the league. But I think offense wise, Ole Miss, there is a problem for me. Jackson Dart hasn't really shown it to me. I mean, it's hard to compare, with Matt Corral's, being there for a couple of years, and you have Jackson Dart. He's no Matt Corral just yet. Maybe he shows it this week against Kentucky. But Kentucky is getting a big piece back. Chris Rodriguez Jr., their talented back, is back from I think it was like a 3 or 4 game suspension. So Kavazia Smoke has been batting down the hatches. So Ole Miss, really relies on the run game. They're in the top 5 in the NCAA in rush attack. So I think that Kentucky is going to really balance their defense and stop them. I think I'm going to go with the Cats on the road. I'm going to go Big Blue Nation to pull off this win. I think it's going to be kind of like similar to your score. I'll go 27-24.
Yeah. And moving on to our second SEC matchup, number 2 Alabama. I'm
If they
sorry.
were number 12, then
Thanks.
undefeated number 12. What's going on?
The number 2 Alabama is going on the road to Woo Pig Sooie in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and this could be the makings of a very interesting game.
Oh
This
boy.
could be an Alabama Texas matchup all over again, and or it could be an Alabama blowout. It could be, and this one I'm gonna go kind of fall in between it, and I'm gonna have Alabama hang on for a win here. I think they win by 14 in this one. High scoring shootout in this one. So I'm gonna go 45-31 in this one. Yes, I think they will have the over big time. The over under is set at 61, and I think it's gonna get blown out of the water in this game.
Geez, a lot of offense. I mean, these are, KJ Jefferson has shown that. I think that Raheem Sanders, excuse me, is going to be a big part for Arkansas. If he can get it going, I think that Arkansas is going to keep this one close. I mean, just like we said earlier in the show, there is concern with this Arkansas defense. I mean, you go, you give up 23 points to an A&M defense, A&M offense that hasn't been able to score really at will. Now you have an Alabama team that just put up 55 against Vanderbilt, 63 against ULM after their 19 points that they put up against Texas. So I think that Alabama has woken up after that Texas game. That was a wake-up call. So they've already had a road test, so I'm not really concerned with Alabama. I mean, Arkansas is trying to do a red out and pull out all the stops to beat them. But this is going to be just another Alabama showing in this one. I have them winning 38-21. I think that Arkansas is just too overmatched in this one.
Yeah. And then moving on from our Power Fives into the Group of Five matchup of the week. And it's 2 service academies going at it. I've got Navy at Air Force on the list here. I told Tyler, I said, we have to do this game. I said, this is a good game here to do. I think you mentioned, tail of the tape is running games for both of these teams. We talked about it a little bit. Navy's always been a running offense, but for Air Force, as you had mentioned to me previously, Air Force is the number 1 rushing team in the country.
It's not even close.
Not even close. I think it's almost double what?
Like 412 average rushing yards, and then Minnesota is like 293 a game.
Yeah. But I mean, that is wild. Over 400 yards of rushing average per game is wild. Their quarterback must be well rested and doesn't have to ice his shoulder or elbow down very much after their games. But I think this one, it's service academies. They're going to go at it, and they're looking for blood. Like this is going to be a big game for these two schools within their respected circle there. That it could be very close, or it could be Air Force coming out and absolutely blowing the doors off of Navy. Navy having a big win in overtime against East Carolina last week. So they're riding high. I think it'll be somewhat close. It's going to be quite a bit of offense, I think, at least for these two teams. I'm going to go 31-28. I'll give it to Air Force. They'll win by 3, just because there's a lot of running in this game, and they're going to bleed the clock as much as possible between these two teams.
So I'm gonna go to the Air Force's jingle here. Nothing can stop the U.S. Air Force, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. Navy won't be able to stop the Air Force's running attack. I do think that this is the Navy Air Force game. I think that Navy, as a team, Air Force has the advantage overall. But I mean, Navy, played East Carolina well. They won that game. I believe is that on the road in East Carolina. Now they have to go on the road again to Colorado. And so this is a Navy team that lost to Delaware, and they only put up 7 points. But looks like they figured out their offense last week against East Carolina. Air Force's defense is really, have been giving up points left and right. So I think that Navy will be able to score with them. The over is at 39. I think that's just way low for me. Definitely take the over if you're a betting man. But I think I'm going to go Air Force in this one. I will give I think that the winner of this game ultimately will get into the 30s. But I'll go 34-24. I think that Air Force is just a better team. They'll show that in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and that is all for our look ahead for games of the week for the Power Five and our one Group of Five love there, and we have to show the Group of Five some love every week. And moving on from there, we're going to go to our news, which is brought to you by Buffalo Bayou Brewing Company. If you guys want to check them out, they are in the Houston metro area. Our boy Chet over there from the Sports Scramble podcast lives close by, and he's visit out there with them. And on our other show on Sports Scramble, doing a little giveaway over there. You guys can tune into that over on the other channel, and they have great beer, huge selection to choose from. Not only beer, they do have some seltzers and everything else in between there. So they're running a great operation there. If you guys want to check them out, head over to Buffalo Bayou Brewing Company and try some of it out. Moving on now to our news, we'll stay with the Group of Five. Well, no, not really.
They're
But
playing like a group of five.
yeah, they play like a Group of Five basically. They're having trouble, and the trouble starts at the head coach position and the AD position. Georgia Tech has fired their head coach and AD after a rough start to the season. What is there for Georgia Tech going forward? I mean, you struggle. I thought that they would be more of a team to give somebody like Clemson some trouble. They always do, and they don't look any good. They look flat. They look really flat, and they're not playing to their full potential in that triple option offense that they've always ran.
Yeah, I definitely think, that they played Clemson really good for a half. I mean, that was, the best half that they played after that. The second half on, then the season on, I mean, Georgia Tech has just been a completely different team. Their defense just look awful. Their offense can't really find any rhythm. They actually don't run the triple option anymore. That was the old ball coach there. Now they run like a pro style offense. So Jeff Collins, now he's not there. I honestly, would, keep Brian Harsin's name, because if he, gets fired, I think that he could go right towards Georgia Tech, because I think that, Brian Harsin did good at Boise State. I think that everyone that's so far has been doing at Boise State. I think that the current coach is struggling. They're 2-2 right now, but I feel like Brian Harsin just isn't right for the SEC. So I think he may be more for like a job like Georgia Tech. I mean, you're in the Atlanta area, you definitely have a lot of recruits there, but the problem is you have the University of Georgia, who pretty much goes in your backyard and steals them right from you. So I either think that Georgia Tech is just going to have to go for one of these group of five schools, but the problem is for Georgia Tech, you have already Nebraska open, Arizona State open, and those are two better programs, especially Nebraska. I think that Georgia Tech and Arizona State are pretty much even programs, but as of late, Arizona State has been the program. Georgia Tech really hasn't, they've had like a 10-win season. They're ranked in the top 10 like 2009, 2008, but they haven't been the same since. So I think that they're going to have to go to the group of five level to find their next head ball coach.
Yeah, it looks like they need to go back to the drama. I like the Harsin pick. I think that it could be a good fit there. Also, I've talked about Coastal Carolina's
Yeah.
head coach moving on from their school. He's on the radar for a lot of schools to go out and get, and he seems to be focused on Coastal Carolina, but that's part of the coaching mantra, of stay focused on the season at hand. But I think once the offseason rolls around, I think we could see a big move from another, big school to a small school like Georgia Tech is program up from the start. Uh, On to another news piece. And speaking of boost, geez, it was like the Energizer Bunny meets limp mode in a car. Uh, Stephen F. Austin, yes, Stephen F. Austin wins a football game. Sure, doesn't matter. They win a football
It's not a
game.
video game either.
Folks, this is not. Yeah, this is not NCAA 14. This is an actual football game where they faced off against Werner and absolutely blew the doors off of them. It wasn't 64 to nothing. It wasn't 77 to nothing, folks. It was 98 to nothing. 98 to nothing. And they missed a 2-point conversion, and they chose, I guess, not to go for the 2-point conversion.
Sportsmanship.
Sportsmanship. It's 98 to
We're already
nothing.
up 98 to nothing, guys. Let's do sportsmanship.
I was so pissed that they didn't just go for the 100 points at this point. Just go for the 100 points. What is the point of the sportsmanship? You've already scored 98 points.
See,
there is no
I played NCAA 14, if I was up 98 to nothing, I don't care about the sportsmanship. I'm going for 100 points. So I think that they should have had the same mindset. But, this Stephen F. Austin program, I've been following the Southland Conference for a couple of years. I mean, this was a team that was a Southland Conference juggernaut, and then they moved to the Western Athletic Conference along with a couple of teams that pretty much like a couple of teams from the Southland moved over to the Western Athletic Conference. I know this is, going to send a lot. I think that, Stephen F. Austin, is a powerhouse in FCS, could be the next James Madison to get a bid. I could see them going to the Conference USA and boosting that conference.
Yeah, they look fantastic. And I think they had 4 quarterbacks in this game.
It would just make sense because there's a lot of, Texas schools in the Conference USA.
Sure, absolutely. And 98 to nothing. I mean, that's atrocious. I mean, that's a glorified beatdown. Yeah, and
Werner should just cancel their football program after that.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but yeah, you couldn't even score. That's pretty bad. But as far as the news goes, that's all for our news. But on to our parlay from last week. We can talk briefly about our parlay from last week.
Yeah.
And how atrocious it was. We just couldn't get anything going right. Nothing. And it trying to rebound, this week. Now that we're into conference play now, lines look a little bit closer, 2.5-point lines all over the place. Some other games where we're scratching our heads going, really? These people they might be playing on the road, but the home team is favored. And we're really scratching our head saying, why isn't the road team favored?
Like Iowa State is favored at Kansas this week. That was definitely a head scratcher I saw.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just feel like Kansas would be the better team in that situation. But it just seems that here we go. We're going to get into the meat and potatoes things. Hopefully we can finally hit on a parlay. I would love to hit on one before we get halfway through the season. Because once we get further down the line, it's just going to be harder and harder in order to get some. So we're trying our hardest, guys. Yeah. And of course, we will give you guys our parlay, and you guys can see the parlay. As soon as we have it up for the weekend, we'll put that out there for everybody. But as for the show, we're over the hour mark, well over the hour mark.
I mean, it's going to be like that once we get into conference play.
Sure, absolutely. And of course, it is Wednesday, guys. Don't have to check your phone or your calendar. It is Wednesday. We are 2 days late.
Yeah, I had jury duty, and then
Tyler had jury duty, and I had
bogged down in homework.
Yeah, and I had some other things to do yesterday that kind of bogged me down. But we wanted to get this out for you guys for the weekend coming up. Some great games to watch, and of course, if you guys want to see more of our content, you guys can head over to Facebook to CFB Coast to Coast, or on Twitter at CFB_Coast to Coast. That's CFB_Coast, the number 2 in Coast. So if you guys want to go check us out over there and watch us on any other platform, not just, on Facebook or Twitter. You guys can find us on Apple Podcast as well at CFB Coast to Coast. Show us some love over there, write a review for us. Let us know how we're doing and what we can do differently to give you guys a better experience for the show. But as always, we will see you guys next week for the week 5 recap and looking ahead to the halfway point of week 6.